Welcome back to our ValueByte series. We are very excited to have Scott joining us for today's ValueBytes. And before we dive in and talk all things resources for our business owners, Scott, if you would just take a moment and tell us a little bit about how you really serve the business community and serve business owners in the work that you do.
Sure. The best way I can describe this is many business owners understand strategic planning and execution, strategic initiatives. It's pretty much the backbone of a lot of good business. Um, I take that same idea, but apply it to the personal life of the business owner, especially if they're considering an exit or some sort of a transition to their business, whether it's a succession plan or they want to own but don't run, or they just want to sell, whatever it is. They cannot escape the fact that they are a human being. And there's a lot of emphasis on exit, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. What I like to do is introduce the idea of a commencement or a graduation as well as an exit, because you're not just ending something. There's so much more life available that it would be a shame to not be strategic about.
Yeah. And I know this is a little bit of a loaded question because I feel like you could talk about it all day. But I know you experienced some significant change in your career, in your life. Can you give us just a snapshot of the story that you've shared with us before about what happened with your business, and give us some ideas of how that helps you work with other business owners or other executives to really think about what's going to happen in their future, how they're going to move forward, and think about that fourth quarter as well.
Absolutely. So the best thing I can do, best way to describe this was I had an unconventional and unplanned exit out of business. I was a family member in a family business my dad started 2008, and that financial downturn was the beginning of the end for our business. After looking to reinvent ourselves, we became vulnerable to one project. We designed and built churches across America. And after 5 years of trying to figure things out, that made us vulnerable from a cash flow standpoint. One project that had to start so that we could bridge ourselves, get into the backlog of over 20 million that we had we were headed toward. But the unfortunate truth was that the pastor of that particular project that needed to start was having an affair with the secretary, and the news came out the same month that we were hoping it would start. So that was the beginning of that was the end of our 44-year business. And now what that ushered me into was this head spinning, I don't know who I am. I have had over the years attached my identity to my vocation. And when the vocation or career is gone, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know if I wanted to work for somebody. It's just, long story short, I was in a cloud, in a fog, trying to figure things out. The long story short of it is I did come out of that cloud, and I looked back and said, what in the world just happened? What took place? And I began to parse it into principles and things I'd learned. And what I'm doing now is a direct link to that experience in my life. What I do today is I am the partner I wish I'd had prior to losing my career, because I would have had a design that I was working on. And although it would have been a very devastating loss, I know and I'm convinced that I would have recovered quicker, and I would not have had near the struggle that I had, because I would have had a strategy I was working on. So I make a distinction between the ups and downs of life, which are natural and automatic. That, death and taxes and the ups and downs of life are things we can all count on. And you can live by default by just going up and down with the life as things happen, or you can be working on a transcendent strategy that takes the ups and downs of life in context. Had I been living by design when this happened, I would have recovered much quicker and stronger, and maybe even avoided it, because the decisions I would have made prior to that would have been more strategic and less reactive. So yeah, that's what happened to me, and that's why I do what I do today.
You know, one of the things that has resonated when we had the opportunity to hear you speak in the past is talking about not only your experience and how you've applied that to what you're doing today, but the importance of community when you have transitions happening. And that's something that I think you've really emphasized in some of the content that you've put out when you've been speaking. And so what are some of the ways that in your experience, and well as just what you've encountered when working with owners yourself, what are some of the ways that owners can really leverage their networks for support?
You know, I out of all that experience, I identified 6 what I call hallmarks of a fantastic fourth quarter, hallmarks of a fantastic life. And let me list them real quickly. There's spiritual, physical, relational, emotional, vocational, and financial. So those are the 6 hallmarks. Um, Pulling from that framework is the best way I can describe a support network. If you had 2 to 3 key individuals in your support network for each of the 6 hallmarks, maybe somebody would be over a couple of them, but you have a support network that is based on these 6 hallmarks. For instance, if I wanted to be physically fit, first of all, it's really good strategically speaking to know exactly what ideal is in your physical life. What does it mean to you to be physically fit? And then who do I know that can help me navigate my journey to becoming as physically fit as I can? Same with relationships. Who do I know is good at relationships? Emotions. There may be a therapist. There may be a just a good friend who. And so you take these 6 hallmarks and you look 2 to 3 individuals, ideally, at least one in each of those, so that you can pull them around you, kind of like a personal board of directors, board of advisors, that you can bounce ideas off of and get their input. Because if you can tap somebody who this is all they do, and maybe even a career coach could be in your vocational hallmark, you're tapping their information for a bigger picture, and you put these pieces together. That to me is the pinnacle of strategic support network.
I love the idea of being able to be intentional about your support network, right? I think a lot of times, at least when I've thought of support network in the past, whether it's been professional or personal, there's a lot of segmentation when in reality, there can be a very collaborative approach for what's personal and professional, but also this type of approach being so intentional kind of figures out where your gaps are, right? Like, do you, if you're really strong on, you know, the physical health, physical fitness side of it, and you're really low on the financial side of it, right? Who can you pull in to kind of even these things out? I love the simplicity of being able to be strategic with your support group.
Yeah, and I would add 2 other thoughts. First of all, when you are living strategically, intention is a given. You don't try to be intentional. When you are strategic, you will be intentional. It's just the way your mind thinks. When you're every morning I wake up and I look at my purpose statement. And that purpose statement, I'm feeding my brain. My brain is aware. The reticulator activating system in our brain. If I can continue to feed that purpose into that, then I begin to see opportunities that I otherwise would never. It's the red car effect. You know, if I'm
Yeah.
focusing on buying a
Yes.
red car, I start seeing red cars everywhere. That's the same. You can do the same thing with your purpose. And so you might have a conversation with somebody, and in the back of your mind, you've been looking for that fitness coach, and they mentioned something about somebody they know, and otherwise it would have just gone right over your head. But now, hey, wait, tell me about that person.
Mm.
What are their credentials, and is that somebody I might want? So that intention just happens when you're strategic, right? The other thing I wanted to mention too is as you become very proficient in any one or more of these hallmarks, it's kind of a reverse of a support network. You can gain so much when you reverse the tables and you become a support to someone else in an area. like, let's say you really are good in your physical fitness. You've got that down. You've got a great support. You can add more value to yourself when you turn the tables and you start mentoring others
Mm-hmm.
in their physical fitness with what you've learned. And that just further builds the impact, the positive impact on your strategy.
I love that. And I think like when hearing you say that idea of when you're working on not on yourself, but then turning it into how you're helping other people. And that is that allows you to actually get into more abundance. I feel it kind of reminds me of Heather and I and how we ended up partnering in our value building marketing. When I originally was Heather's employee. She was my
Long time ago.
a long time ago. And
And
then
you said we got to change that.
right. And years
I ran her
later,
off.
she ran me off. And then years later, I started my own business. And that mentorship that I received from Heather really allowed me to build my business. And now what's happened is the way that we've worked and evolved is now we're partners in value building marketing because of just the years of what we built together. But had Heather not have approached it from a lens of, pouring out and helping me build my business, we wouldn't have been at this position we are now, where now we're able to leverage both of our areas of expertise and networks to even do a more strategic, which ends up being intentional job at helping our clients with marketing strategies. So that absolutely resonates with our personal story.
I really like too this idea of, I think sometimes we kind of feel like we're in one situation or the other. We're either in a situation to teach and mentor,
Mhm.
or we need someone to teach and mentor
Mhm.
us. And so really dividing that up and thinking, where are our strengths and where do we have the energy and the knowledge to pour out to others? And where do we need someone to help bring us up to their level
Mhm.
instead of it just being a black or white situation? I really love that because it gives people, I think as you progress in your career and building your business, you can get to a point where it feels very lonely, right? Because it's like, you either have people who can learn from you or you can learn from, and it's easy to forget that you can be in both camps,
Mm.
right? That you can
Well,
be
yeah.
that person to everyone.
I think it's I think it's vital that you're in both camps. In fact, I don't have any empirical data to back this up, but I'm thinking 70-30 rule. I think for every 3 units of benefit you receive from a mentor, you can get 7 units by giving to someone else. There's something about the process you go through in order to speak into somebody else's life that has such a rebounding effect to you than if you were just to simply receive from someone. I think both are needed. But I would say if you had to choose, if you wanted to grow in your support network and you had to choose whether or not to receive or to give, I would lean in the direction of giving.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that we all just see that comes back around, right? The more that we give, the more that we end up receiving. Like you said, whether it's from the situation where we're mentoring or if it just puts us in a position where we're in the right headspace and emotional space to be able to receive as well.
Mhm.
So I love that idea. I want to shift topics here just a little bit. Your answer may still be in line with the same topic, but thinking about the owners that you work with, that you do coaching with, what are some common challenges that you see them facing? And then what are some of your favorite first steps to help them start overcoming those challenges?
Well, I could say it's the human condition, right? We all have challenges that just being a part of life. But for the business owner, there's a layer or two that non-business owners don't fully understand or could ever understand. Tried to explain it to them. There's this whole idea, for example, of being responsible for multiple families, their
Mm-hmm.
lives. So when they think about potentially exiting, they're one of the common things I've noticed is in an exit scenario is an emotional attachment to the business. And especially if they started it or bought it decades ago. And it's a part of their family now. It's a part of their life. And the whole idea of exiting creates this emotional uptick in stress because I don't want to leave this, but there's grieving involved and all. Um, Probably the biggest challenge, and I think it's because I went through what I did, it's this identity. Common challenge business owners wrestle with is that the business has become a part of their identity.
Mhm.
And it's very difficult to change the way you think about your business as an expression of who you are, not a definition of who you are. That is key to a lot of the other things because for example, I have a long-standing client. He's in year number 4 of his second 5-year plan right now. And so he's a veteran. I mean, but he wasn't always on top of things, always strategic. When he first came to me, his family had 2 businesses, and one of those businesses they were trying to sell, and it wasn't going well. And he wasn't sure how it was going. His dad took over, was running that business. He was running the other business, and he knew as his dad was aging that he would have to somehow run this business if we didn't sell it. And he said, God, I don't care at all about that business. And I'm afraid I'm going to have to deal with it. So we wrestled through that. One of the most profound things that he points that he reached was that he said, if my life was a circle, he said, this business that my dad was running that I couldn't figure out how I was going to let go, I saw it as such a huge circle within my circle. And he said, working through this with you, I've realized that it's a much smaller piece. There's so much more to me than this business. And that the reason that was so profound for him was I talk about agency and regaining your agency, which is the sense of control that you have. We talk about being on top of the world when things are going well, and we talk about being under the weather when we're sick. So on top and under. When you're under things, you have lost your agency. You don't feel like you're feeling controlled by circumstances and other people's decisions. When you're on top of things, you feel like you have options and choice. And the more he realized he had choice, then he was able to make more strategic decisions about his family's other business. And it turned out that there were opportunities that came along, and he recognized those because he had the mind space. So that's a clear example of regaining your agency for a strategic purpose. I'll tell you, to answer your question, one of the first things that I do with my clients is we pull off the barnacles that have been attached to identity, and we rediscover what that identity is. Who are you? What are your core values, your strengths, weaknesses, gifts, support network, your existing support network? What's going on? What's your context? And who are you? And then we begin to say, all right, this is who you are. Now let's build from here.
Yeah.
So I best way to describe it is a kind of manufacture a loss without the loss actually taking place. I pull from my experience where my identity was gone within inside of a couple of weeks. I had no idea. I simulate that kind of thing in a very supportive environment where we say, all right, forget the business, forget everything else, all the other stuff. Who are you? And then we start to build from there.
That's really challenging for most business owners.
Yeah.
But that's really
It-
hard. But so much
it's one
better
of
to do it in that situation than in the situation you faced where
Yeah.
it's not pretend.
Yeah, it's a matter of saying, hey, have you thought about what you're going to do on Monday after you've sold your business?
Right.
No, I haven't. Or yes, I have. I'm going to golf. Oh,
I'm
really?
going to be a
You're going to
little
golf?
more to make it feel like a human being than just
Right.
golf.
Golf
That's
might
right.
get you through the weekend, right?
That's right. Yep.
You kind of touched on this already, but I wanted to ask to go a little bit deeper. So, you really come in and help owners create a strategic life plan. And so I think you touched on this in your story about how there's it's creating more headspace, which I'm sure alleviates stress. But what are some other aspects of having a strategic life plan that really helps promote peace of mind for business owners when they're preparing to exit the business?
Well, I would love to say that armed with a strategic plan, the life's ups and downs begin to smooth out, and all of a
Sure.
sudden you
Is
have
that not
all
what
ups.
happens?
No, I'm sorry, it doesn't. However, um, the windfalls and opportunities that come along, those are fun. We can say, okay, this is great. I can parlay this into my strategic plan. But even the setbacks, we get a diagnosis or someone very close to us passes unexpectedly. There's going to be an emotional uh, journey that you go through. But if you have that strategic plan and you know who you are and where you're headed, then even that setback, that diagnosis, or that death that occurred in someone close to you, once, and I'm not saying just go right back up to your plan and say, okay, this has happened. What do we do? Allow yourself to be human and go through the grieving process and all. But as you come out of that and as you begin to process the loss or the setback, you say, what is this telling me about my strategy and where I'm headed, moving the needle to where I want to be ultimately, and what is my definition of fulfillment? um, that alone generates a peace of mind. It doesn't keep stress from coming, but it gives stress a contender, and you can address the contender. The whole identity piece is so critical. It is so different between saying I am afraid and there's the fear. When I say I am afraid, unintentionally but very profoundly, we are putting on fear like a shirt, and we're
Yeah.
saying this is who I am. I am afraid. That's my identity.
Yeah.
That's living by default. That is just taking on the emotion brought on by circumstances. But if you're living by a strategic plan, then you are more likely to say, there's the fear, there's the grief, there's the loss, as though I am still intact as a human being and I've got my strategy and my identity. I'm experiencing this right now. And to me, had I been able to say, there's the loss, I know that would have been a whole different picture for me. And are we going to be completely at peace of mind all the time? I don't think so. It's not possible in the world. But we can be more strategic and more peaceful as a way of life as we go through the non-peaceful moments.
That's
Yeah.
really resonates. I mean, just from the most simple form, being able to step in and address, like, there's the fear, there's the loss as a separate thing. I think it really can allow for that more productive self-talk versus that toxic reactionary
Yeah.
kind of living that can happen sometimes. And then it's just digging the hole, right? To live in the rut.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You experience a
that makes
loss
a
and
lot of sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
if
I love that
yeah, if
idea of you're experiencing something, but it's not changing who you are.
Right.
Still have your
it's you being a human being having an experience as opposed to the experience defining you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Okay, so business owners who are listening right now, I want you to tell them two things. One, what would be the first step you would recommend that they take to living their life with more purpose and intention, if they can just do one thing today? And then two, where can they connect with you to learn more? Because I know we've just barely even grazed the surface here on everything that you have to share.
Yeah, I would the first step would be my mind immediately goes to the 6 hallmarks. And I've got a download, which would answer your first question and the second question. But I've got a hallmark strategy that is very simple. You craft a letter to a friend that is 5 years from now, and you describe what your life is like in the spiritual, in the physical, in all 6. And you write that email today as though it's happening today. Get your mind thinking the ideal. James Clear, in his book Atomic Habits, talks about decide the type of person you want to be and then prove it to yourself with small wins. So decide the type of person you want to be physically, spiritually, relationally, and so on, and start saying, what would that person do in every point of decision as you go forward? You can get that by emailing me at coach@servingstrong.com. Just say, give me the 6 hallmark strategy. So coach@servingstrong.com is my email. Serving Strong is the email, or is the website, servingstrong.com. I am all over LinkedIn. That's where I live, almost exclusively to all the other social media platforms. So you can search my name. And by the way, my last name is pronounced like drinking a Coke every hour.
Couchenour. That's a good way to remember it.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for taking time to share about your experience and just diving into some quick tips for owners when they're planning for their strategic life plan. And definitely, I know we're going to be emailing you for the 6 hallmarks, because I feel a little bit called out, even though, we're not in our 4th quarter. I feel like when we've heard you talk before, so much of it is just really eye-opening and the power to do that now, because I think even when we're not in our 4th quarter, things can still feel limiting and feel like we're somehow encroaching on some sort of ending, right? Versus it being a new journey. So I know we're going to be emailing you for that. And so we'll see, hopefully other folks will jump on that bandwagon and get smart about it as well.
Well, listen, the client that I mentioned that's in his second 5-year plan with me, I am now working with his 3 sons who are in their 30s, and they're all
Fantastic.
really cool to see them building out their strategic plan and living life strategically from age 30. You imagine what you could do in 50 years.
Wow. Yeah.
That's amazing. All right, Scott, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and we look forward to having you on again soon.
Absolutely.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you, ladies.